easier to do something when you are 28 than having 28 different countries trying to do it by themselves. So working together, cooperation, which is a word which has been repeated quite often today, but it's a very important one. Cooperation and working together within the framework of the EU has given the possibility for EU member states to create programs which otherwise would have been impossible to do for them alone. So the fact to work together has been able to develop programs which otherwise would not have been developed in the EU. And the second aspect, what the EU is concerned by space program, and it's something which is dear to your heart, to many of you, and which has already been said at many occasions today, is the fact that we consider that space is a fundamental for growth. The world cannot live with space now, and we are sure that in 20 years' time, in 30 years' time, it will be even less possible to live without the space element. So we consider that if we really want to build economic growth and jobs in Europe, we need also to have a space vector which is quite efficient. And that's why we consider as a political body that it's important that we invest in space. Now, in Europe, situations are always complex. So you have the EU, you have ESA, and you have seen Jan Werner quite, during one of the previous panel. We have ESA, and of course you have the national space agencies. And the message here is also very clear. We are not fighting between ourselves. We are working together. We have our own competencies, we have our own role, we have our own resources, but the key message is cooperation, cooperation, cooperation. You know, space is too big to have division within Europe. So it's important that we work together and we consider that we are able to achieve this. So in my presentation, I will be relatively short because I want also to give you an opportunity to ask questions and to have a real dialogue with me. So I would have a very short presentation, simply insisting on where we are, and probably more interesting for you, where do we want to go in the near future? So first point, where are we? In Europe, we have, at EU level, we have 3 programs which have been developed and which are running for the moment. We have EGNOS, Galileo, and Copernicus. And one aspect also which is extremely important, on which I will come back, is the fact that we invest also a lot of resources and money in research for space. So let me start first by EGNOS. You might have heard about EGNOS. EGNOS is a system which basically enhances the GPS signal to give a more precise localization. And that's a system which is active now, being used, and that's a system which is especially useful for aviation, but also for maritime or, agricultural when you want to have more precision. So EGNOS is something which is quite working well, but of course we will come back to what we want to do with EGNOS in the future. Second program, Galileo. So far it's still being called the European GPS. I'm sure that at one of your next conferences, GPS will be called the American Galileo. But so far it's still the European GPS. What do we do with Galileo? With Galileo, we have 17, so far we have 17 satellites in orbit. And we have declared what we call initial services in December 2016. What does it mean, initial services? It means that we already provide services, simply we don't provide them on 24 hours for the whole globe all the time. But still, what I can already tell you, that the signals that we are receiving by Galileo are quite precise. Actually, according to independent experts, they are the best signal available so far. Of course, it's not covering the whole globe, it's not covering 24 hours during a whole year, but still, what we are getting out of Galileo is quite precise and better than what we have been received so far. Now, Galileo, initial services, has also helped us to build a market uptake. And we see now more and more devices using Galileo. You might have read that the new Samsung telephone is using Galileo. And you will be, without knowing it maybe, but you will be able to use a Galileo signal on your new Samsung phone. The new iPhone, the iPhone 8, will also have Galileo incorporated and will be activated, which means, again, maybe without knowing it, but when you will use your GPS incorporated in the iPhone, you will use also the Galileo signal. And maybe something which you might have not noticed, but which is also extremely important, and which will make a huge difference in the future. You might have seen that Broadcom, one of the biggest chip producers in the world, has decided that it would manufacture and sell to everybody dual frequencies chip. And if you look at dual frequencies for localization, Galileo has many more satellites than GPS for this, which means that the use of Galileo will be even more spread through the use of these chips. So Galileo is not, because in Europe sometimes you have people being pessimistic and saying we spend a lot of money on Galileo, but when are we going to see the end of it? Galileo is a reality and will continue to be a reality in the future. Last program, Copernicus. Copernicus is Earth observation. So we are using many aspects of Copernicus to monitor, for instance, the seas, to monitor, land transformation. We use it also for agriculture. We use it for many applications. But unfortunately, one application which is widely known is the fact that we are also using Copernicus when you have natural disasters. And you might have seen that in the unfortunate events which took place a few weeks ago in the Caribbean and in the US, Copernicus was actually activated and helped people to escape to a certain extent the hurricanes, and also help people to find those who were affected by the hurricanes. So Copernicus is working, is being applied, and is bringing a lot of positive results. Something you have to realize also about Copernicus, and I will come back to this, that the data are completely free and open to anybody. And I will come back to this. So anybody can access the data of Copernicus, but I will come back to this because that's a very important aspect. Finally, research. Research is a very important element, and I believe that's clear for everybody in this room and everybody in this place. Research is an extremely important element, because if we don't invest in research now, we will not build the systems that we need in the future. And because of the long term it takes for new development to take place in the space sector, we need to take decisions now which will have an effect in 10, 15 years from now. As the EU, we are investing a large amount of research, all kinds of research linked to space. But we believe it's extremely important if we really want to maintain our competitive edge also for the future. So research is a very important dimension of what we do. Now, what is probably more interesting for you is where do we want to go? Where do we want the EU to be in the future? And in this respect, we have decided as a EU to adopt a space strategy. It's very fashionable to adopt space strategy. I mean, everybody is adopting space strategy, but I believe it's important also to have such a strategy. Why? Because again, you create a consensus, you create an agreement on what you want to do in the future. And if you don't create this agreement now, one thing for sure, you will not be able to be there in the future if you don't have this agreement now. So having a space strategy, it's not only a political document, it's also a document which helps people to understand together what are the challenges and how to address them and to solve them. So it's a very important document. Now, more concretely, how do we see the evolution of the different programs? EGNOS. EGNOS, as I told you, is being used, for instance, in many airports in Europe. We want to expand the number of airports using EGNOS, because we believe it's a very powerful instrument, and we need to have more airports using this technology. On EGNOS 2, we are working on the evolution of EGNOS. We want to improve the system, and we are now in the process of selecting a company which will help us to build a more efficient systems, because we believe that we cannot rest on our laurel and we need to continue to develop and to improve the situation. Finally, something which is important on EGNOS and might be of interest maybe for some of you. We don't want to keep EGNOS for Europe. We are willing to share EGNOS with other countries in the world. And actually, we have already signed a cooperation agreement with a part of Africa for building an EGNOS system in Africa, at least part of Africa. So we are willing to continue this effort of cooperation and to create a network between different countries, and the EU, because we believe it's important that this technology could be used also elsewhere in the world. And again, it's for free, so we don't ask you don't have to pay for it. Of course, you need to invest in the technology, but you don't have to pay us for it. So we are very open with this. Second aspect, Galileo. Galileo will be fully operational for 2020. That's a clear target, and I can guarantee you one thing, we will be there in 2020. So we will have a full operational system by that date. How do we intend to achieve this? Simply by launching more satellites. Before the end of this year, it's very likely that we will launch again 4 Galileo satellites with Ariane 5. And we will do the same thing next year, and we'll continue to do it. So we want to maintain more satellites in orbit to make sure that we reach this target date of 2020. And the system, I can guarantee you, will be extremely operational. Second aspect of Galileo, we are already working on new developments. Because as I told you before, we know that you need to take decisions now for the future. So we are already working on the evolution of Galileo, even if we have not yet finalized the initial phase. But we know that we need to take those decisions now to already improve the future Galileo in the system, in the future. But one thing which is clear, Galileo will continue to function in the future. There is a clear commitment by all stakeholders in Europe on this. On Copernicus, as I told you, Copernicus provides a lot of images of Earth. And I told you those data are open and free to everybody. But we need to be realistic, and we have noticed it. Those data actually are too big to be processed and to be applied by everybody. So what are we going to do in the very near future? And when I say very near future, I mean beginning of next year. We are asking and paying, actually, private operators to build some kind of cloud where all those data would be available and would also give the tools to process those data. Those platforms are called the DIAs. And there was a question this morning, or this afternoon by a student saying, how do I get access to data? The logic of the DIAs would be that anybody, anywhere in the world, with a computer and internet connection, will be able to process those data coming from space. Why do we do such a thing? Because as I told you, we consider space is a vector for growth. And we believe that by giving those data for free and by giving the tool to process those data, we will create innovation, we will create new applications, we will create new jobs, we will create economic growth. So for us, Copernicus and the data that we are getting out of Copernicus are a tool for everybody to find growth. And again, it will be open to anybody, anywhere in the world, provided you have an internet connection and a computer, of course. Otherwise, it's a little bit complicated. But we believe it's an extremely important step if we want to go ahead, because we believe it's something also we make information available to everybody. On Copernicus 2, and I believe that's something which is important and might be of concern for Australia, but also for the country, we really believe that we need to enhance the cooperation between our systems and other systems which might exist in the world. So we have already concluded a series of agreements with different third countries to exchange information coming from Copernicus and coming from their system. For instance, I mentioned to you the use of Copernicus images in the hurricane situation in the US. Actually, why the US was able to use this information? Because we have an agreement with them to exchange this kind of information. And we are willing to continue and to sign more and more of these agreements. Because again, space is a matter for everybody, not only for the EU, not only for a few countries in the world. So we are really open to any kind of relationship and agreement with the rest of the world to exchange this kind of data. Knowing, of course, that if we exchange those data, they will be on our platform and they will be fundamentally available for everybody in the world. But again, we want to promote growth, we want to develop new applications, new services based on imageries, and that's the way we consider we should do it. On Copernicus 2, we want to make progress and we want to develop new programs in the future with respect to Copernicus Earth observation. One element which has already been mentioned at several occasions today is climate change. We need to use space to monitor what's going on with climate change. And we are fully aware, of course, that climate change and observation of climate changes is not something to be done only by the EU. But we are willing to invest our money and we are willing to invest a lot of effort and resources to develop systems which would allow us to monitor climate change. But of course, because of the general nature of climate change, we are also willing to cooperate and to network with other parties in the world, because we consider it's important that we create systems which are compatible and can deliver the same kind of result. So climate change is certainly a priority for us in the future. Copernicus could also be used for a security dimension, which unfortunately in Europe is becoming extremely important. So we are reflecting what we could do to use this kind of Earth observation images also to monitor security situation in different parts of Europe. Again, as I said, that's unfortunately a situation in which we are all. Finally, we are also considering whether we could use Copernicus, future missions of Copernicus for the Arctic and observation of the Arctic, which is linked also to the question of climate change, of course, everything is linked. So as you see, we are quite ambitious of Copernicus because we really believe it's a powerful tool that we should develop and continue to develop, again, not in isolation, but in cooperation with the rest of the world. But we don't want to stop to this. And, you know, we talk about ambitions. We are ambitious. And we want to develop other types of cooperation and program at the EU level. GovSatcom, governmental satellite communication. So far in Europe, we have a certain number of member states which have developed this type of systems. But not all EU member states have developed such a secure system. You have also commercial operators which can provide this technology. We are reflecting, and no decision has been taken so far, but we are reflecting of what we could do to have a better integration at EU level of GovSatcom. What could be the way forward to make sure that all 28 member states will get the same access to GovSatcom technology. We believe it's extremely important. Again, that's also linked to the question of security already mentioned. But we believe it's important that we can develop this together, all together, and we are talking to the member states to see what will be the best approach to do it. Finally, SST, space surveillance and tracking. If we have assets in the space, you know, we have the Galileo satellite, we have EGNOS, we have Copernicus satellite, we need to find a way to protect them, and we need to find a way to make sure that they continue to be protected. So SST is a priority for the EU and will be in the priority in the future. Now again, I'm not saying that everything will be done by the EU Commission. Probably we'll have some kind of cooperation with the member states, but we need to foster this cooperation and to make sure that we deliver a very efficient SST system. What else as ambition? We really want, you know, there was a debate this morning about all new space or new old space. Actually, what we want to build in Europe is a real new space. What do I mean by this? We want to build an ecosystem in which everybody, all citizens, will have the possibility to benefit from space and to develop services and products based on space. So it's basically, we consider that the money we invest at EU level is an investment not for us, not for our body, but for everybody in Europe, but also even in the world. And we want, by this, to allow people to develop things that otherwise will not be possible to be developed. So it's not new space in the sense of the US, meaning where you have big private investors investing their money in space and hoping to get benefits. We just provide a public asset, space, and we give it to everybody. And we hope people will develop new things on this. And we are confident that we have enough quality in Europe and we have enough entrepreneurs in Europe to be able to achieve this. Finally, and I would like to conclude on this before giving you the possibility to ask a few questions, and that's not a surprise to you, but cooperation is fundamental. As I already told you, we want to cooperate on EGNOS, we want to cooperate on Copernicus, and even on Galileo, cooperation is important. We don't see the role of the EU in space as, fighting against the other, against the US, fighting against China, India, Russia, and so on. We really believe that space is too important to have this kind of fights. What we really need is full cooperation. So we are willing to have dialogues with everybody. We are willing to sign cooperation agreement and to exchange information with everybody in the world. And I was very pleased to hear that there will be very soon an Australian space agency. I'm sure that if they want to visit Brussels, of course it's less nice than Adelaide, but if they want to visit Brussels, they are most welcome to come and to have a dialogue with us. Or we will go back to Adelaide or Canberra, whatever place this space agency will be established, to have such a dialogue. But again, when we talk about the EU ambition in space, actually it's not ambitions for the EU, we really have ambitions for everybody. Space is too important not to deliver benefits to everybody. Thank you very much. Now, I'm supposed to give you an opportunity to ask questions, and you have microphones in the room.
Hello. Thank you very much for your talk. About 18 months ago, Australia and the European Union entered into an agreement to provide Australia with access to Copernicus's data that related to the Australian region. And I was really interested by what you said. You mentioned that private operators will be building a cloud system in which anybody can access and process Copernicus data in a much easier way. Will these cloud platforms be built for the regional Australian Copernicus data hub, or does that just relate to the European side of things?
I'm not sure I've completely heard the question, because it's true that we are talking about space technology, which is quite advanced, and microphones are not yet quite working. But I believe what you said, and correct me if it's not correct, is just to see to which extent these platforms that we are developing would be accessible to everybody in Australia and everywhere else. That was the question?
Basically, yes.
Okay. So the question. So let me talk about these platforms, the so-called DIAs. What have we done? Actually, we have launched a procurement to select 4 consortia composed of different companies. Some of them being expert in space, but others being expert more in the digital technologies and so on. And those 4 consortia who have been selected and will receive money from the Commission will establish platforms which will be available to anybody in the world, provided you connect to them, of course. And those platforms will contain all Copernicus data, but also all data which are coming from different sources, either because we have a cooperation agreement with some part of the world, So you will have a lot of data which are available there, but also the idea is to give the tool to process those data. Because the problem so far with Copernicus data, they are huge, but nobody actually can use them, or basically almost nobody, because it's too difficult to process and to have the tool. So we want to give the tool for people to use those data and to develop new services. And again, it will be open, accessible to everybody, and we hope at the end of the day it will benefit, companies in Europe, companies in Australia and anywhere else, potentially.
question on my side. You were talking about cooperation and Copernicus 2. My question relates to how you plan together, potentially with other space agencies, the future programs in terms of satellites. Because you talk about cooperation, but what I hear is exchange of data. And I do not hear so far potential cooperation in developing spacecraft which are developed in common with, complementary capabilities and sharing of capabilities between satellites developed maybe in Japan or in China and satellites developed in Europe. You see what I mean?
I see what you mean. I'm not sure I've heard completely the question because of the micro, but okay, I see what you mean. So basically, the way I understood the question is when we talk about cooperation, we don't talk about creating together, like a satellite with people outside of EU. That was basically the question. I'm simplifying a little bit the question, but that...
Or a constellation of satellites.
Constellation of satellites. Agree. First response to this, and then second response. First response. The EU is not a vocation to basically cover all kinds of programs which might exist. So if we are talking, for instance, space exploration, it's not being done by the EU. Space exploration is being done in Europe by ESA, and ESA is cooperating, as you know, with many other space agencies in the world for space exploration. When we talk about developing the programs that we are developing, we talk about Galileo. Galileo is localization systems, and if you look at the localization systems which are being developed or have been developed in the world, all of them have been done by one country, and in our case by a body which is the EU. So you don't really have cooperation in this for the satellites. I'm talking about the satellites. Still, if you look at the future, and if you look at future development, it would be probably very important and interesting to look at what's being done elsewhere and maybe to have some kind of talks. I'm not saying having the same satellite, because it's important also to have resilience and to have different types of satellites, but maybe reflecting together of what should be the evolution. That could be a nice way to cooperate. But let's be clear so far. I mean, the Americans have developed the GPS, the Russians have developed GLONASS, you have the Chinese developing their systems, and Japan also doing it, and now Europe. So it's true that all those systems have been developed in isolation, globally in isolation. But for the future, we might look at what kind of cooperation we can create for the future development and evolution of the systems. But again, let's be careful also. Probably having resilience is a key aspect for positioning. It's important that you don't have only one system, but you might have different systems. We believe it's important. For Copernicus, I mentioned climate change. Climate change for me could be a very good example of cooperation in the future between different parts of the world. And I believe it would be important to develop in common satellites which would help to monitor climate change, of evolution of the climate. I believe that's something which is important. And certainly from the EU point of view, we are willing to explore this. But of course, we need partners in this. We need others to do it. And that's not always so obvious. But again, I'm not closing the door on this. And Copernicus, again, if you look at the images and Earth observation, as I said, we see Copernicus as a tool also, and that's why we consider it's important to share the tool and the results of the tool with others, and that's our philosophy in this respect.
Pierre, I think it would be interesting to hear your comment about the following point. I mean, data from Copernicus are free, and even for Galileo will be available to everybody. But there is an issue about high accuracy data, and there is an issue about how this policy of making data available for free is influencing private sector investment in new constellation or new satellite to perform Earth observation. So how do you think the balance between freedom in the data, safety, security in high precision data, and the private sector are playing together in your scheme?
You see, we have a lively discussion because we have a representative of a EU Space Agency asking a very difficult question, which is certainly a very fundamental one. It's clear that the open policy approach that we have followed, we certainly do not want to change it short term. But it's also clear that, for instance, if we want Copernicus to develop on security and having the security dimension, it's very likely that those security dimensions will not be open. Because by definition, if you go for security, you need to have some kind of protection. So it's very likely, again, no decision has been taken today, but it's very likely that if we develop a program of Earth observation with a security dimension, the data that we are going to get from it will not be shared with everybody. But of course, the question which is being asked by Roberto is also, if we look at the future, it's possible that we might want to develop partnership with the private sector to have, to create new Earth observation systems, which would be partly publicly funded, but also privately funded. And of course, in this context, if the data are free, you create a problem, because who is going to invest in a satellite when you know that the data of those satellites will be free and you cannot sell them and you cannot get any money out of it? So that's a debate that we need to have in Europe. And to which extent do we want to have private investor in our Copernicus system mechanism? And if so, does it mean that we lose the open data policy approach? No answer has been given to this, but that's certainly a question that will need to be addressed in the future. But I'm sure, Roberto, you will have the answer very soon for me. So, I count on you to give me the answer very quickly. Maybe one last question?
Question here.
Bonjour, Monsieur. So congratulations, firstly, on reaching Galileo iOS. You mentioned 2020 for FOSS. If I may ask a narrow question, because I'm from the UK, how strong is the boundary, or how clear is the boundary between the EU and ESA? Because historically, there have been political struggles between ESA and EU on who controls Galileo, both politically and technologically. So with Brexit looming, with that budget that will no doubt be withdrawn in some capacity, how does that impact FOSS for 2020? And also the security tree, which is being developed by all the member states with Britain pulling out, surely that will also impact how the security envelope is defined for Galileo.
I need to be honest with you, I've not understood your question. Not because she was not a very clever question, but again, because it's difficult. Maybe if you just say it like this without the macro, it will be easier. I've heard the word ESA quite a few times.
The impact of Galileo and timeline for what you mentioned 2020 and the security envelope for Galileo, because Britain has a say on the envelope.
It's much easier without the technology. So the question is relating about the Brexit and what's going to happen. I don't know. No one knows for sure, of course. That's clear. I don't know what will be the relationship between the EU and UK after the Brexit, and that's something which is not known by anybody. But with respect to Galileo and Copernicus, actually, and the other programs, you have to realize that there is a commitment by the UK to fund these programs until 2020. So the money, and that's part of the discussion with UK in the context of the Brexit. UK has committed to a certain amount of money, which in part will cover Galileo and Copernicus. So until 2020, we don't see any problem, and we'll continue, and I can tell you we already are spending this money, actually, to purchase new satellites. So we are purchasing new satellites. You might have seen also that we have signed the first contract to purchase Ariane 6, to launch those satellites. So we are confident that we have the money until 2020. After 2020, and now it's becoming very complex, we have a budget which has to be agreed with the member states for 5 years or 7 years. And of course, we will have to have a discussion with the member state at that moment on the amount of money that are willing to agree on Galileo and Copernicus and all the other missions. But I mentioned to you the space strategy. Why have we adopted the space strategy? Because we wanted to have a political document on which all member states will have a possibility to discuss before we discuss the budget issues. And when I see the reaction on the space strategy, I see a consensus from all member states. And in the space strategy, if you read it, there is a clear commitment to continue Galileo, to continue EGNOS, and to develop Copernicus, as I said, plus SST and GovSatcom. So I'm not too pessimistic, because I believe all member states, 27 member states, after, of course, for the next budget, 27 member states will understand the importance of space for Europe. So I'm confident that despite the Brexit, solution will be found. One more question? I'm probably already too long, so that's... Okay. If not, I will give the floor to François Rivasseau, and thank you very much.